The Vatican never calls it a secret division. On paper, my office is a subsection of a subsection inside the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, tasked with supporting the discernment of alleged supernatural phenomena. In practice, we are the people they send when something breaks the rules of nature and refuses to apologize. I am not a priest. I'm a lay investigator with a degree in law, a background in risk assessment, and a contract thick enough to stop a small caliber round. My badge does not open every door in the city-state, but it opens enough that my relatives think I work in some kind of security consultancy, and I let them keep thinking that. Most days my job is boredom with a thin crust of horror. Reading reports about statues that supposedly cried blood. Pigeons, usually. Visionaries who insist the Virgin Mary told them the winning lottery numbers. She didn't. And the occasional exorcism file that reminds me why our corridors have chapels at both ends. We are trained to be skeptical first, faithful second. If we can explain it with medicine, physics, or fraud, we do. If we can't, the file moves sideways to people with older tools. The morning it changed, I was in my cubicle going through a stack of alleged apparitions, all of them urgent, according to their bishops, and none of them looking like anything but human desperation on paper. Fluorescent lights buzzed. My coffee had gone cold. The city outside St. Peter's was doing its usual chaos. Scooters, pilgrims, pickpockets. Then my terminal chimed with a priority flag. Internal memorandum. Restricted Cole Mateo, Lay Investigator, Section 4. You are hereby assigned to case file A17 INT. Report immediately to Archive Sublevel C. Bring identification and travel dossier. No electronic devices beyond Checkpoint 2. Signed Mons Beltrami, Deputy Prefect, Doctrinal Oversight. No subject line, no explanatory note. Just a case number I'd never seen before, and a destination I had only heard about in jokes. Archive Sublevel C. The official archives, the ones tourists imagine when they whisper about the Vatican secrets, are mostly boring. Old letters, older maps, shelves of dust and history students' dreams. Sublevel C is not on the tour. I had been down there once in 6 years to deliver a sealed envelope and sign 3 forms saying I had not read it. I grabbed my ID, the worn leather folder I used for field work, and my courage, such Como era. The elevator to the archive levels runs from a nondescript corridor behind a nondescript door 2 floors below my office. The guard there checked my badge more carefully than usual, then compared the memo on his screen with the one on my terminal. You've annoyed someone important, he said. Story of my life, I answered. The ride down felt longer than it should have. Floors ticked past on the tiny display, then disappeared entirely, replaced by a simple downward arrow. The air cooled. Mobile reception died. At Checkpoint 2, as promised, a Swiss guard in civilian clothes took my phone, my watch, and my pen, slid them into a locker, and handed me a numbered tag. Follow the red line, he said. Do not deviate. If you get lost, stop walking. Someone will find you. Comforting, I muttered. The corridor beyond was carved stone, overlapped by modern renovations. Conduits in the ceiling, discrete cameras, environmental sensors winking green. A red stripe ran along the floor, turning left, then right, then left again, like a vein leading deeper into the body. The last door had no sign, just a card reader and a small metal plate for a seal that wasn't there. I tapped my badge. The lock clicked. The door opened onto a room that smelled faintly of paper, ink, and incense. Monsignor Beltrami was waiting for me at a table in the center, sleeves rolled up, white hair in disarray, glasses perched halfway down his nose. He looked like an overworked librarian until you noticed the way his eyes weighed everything when you walked in. Matteo, he said, sit. On the table between us lay a file folder, the color of old cream, bound with a red ribbon and stamped with more seals than most international treaties. Across the front, in precise Latin, was written Index Angelorum Interdictorum, Index of Forbidden Angels. I had heard the phrase exactly twice before. Once as a joke from a senior examiner who swore there was a list in the archives of names you don't put on paintings. Once in confession from a priest who mentioned very carefully that some truths were not for the faithful, but for the custodians. Seeing it in print tightened something behind my ribs. "I thought that was a rumor," I said, before I could stop myself. Beltrami's mouth twitched. "Rumors are a convenient way to talk about things we don't have permission to name," he said. "In this case, the rumor has a filing code. A-series, interdicted entities, angelic class." "You want me to read it?" I asked. "I want you to meet one of them," he said. The room felt suddenly smaller. "With respect, Monsignore," I said, "my work is with alleged supernatural phenomena, apparitions, healings, possessions, people. I interview shepherds who saw lights in the field, nurses who swear a dying man stopped dying, families convinced their son's Latin homework is a sign of demonic influence. I don't talk to angels. Today you will," he said mildly, "as a representative of this dicastery, as a layman whose faith is functional, not romantic, and as someone who writes reports carefully." That last part was not a compliment. I had earned a reputation for footnotes that made lawyers uncomfortable. He untied the ribbon, opened the file. I caught flashes, parchment copies, typed translations, marginal notes in different hands and centuries. Latin, Italian, French, a name I did not recognize, followed by too many titles. "Long story short," he said, tapping the page with one thin finger, "this entity is recognized by the Church as angelic in origin, not a demon, not a pagan spirit dressed up for Sunday. An angel. Once mentioned, briefly, in early apocryphal writings, then quietly removed from devotions, litany, iconography, placed on a list, not to deny existence, but to forbid invocation, representation, and public cult." "Why?" I asked. "Because angels are not all suited to parish statues," he said. "Some are inconvenient. This one in particular developed a history of intervention in ways that did not align with policy. Saints are supposed to obey. Angels even more so. When they do not, we have problems." "Are we talking about a fall?" I asked. The old reflex from catechism class. Disobedience, pride, down you go. "No," he said. "If it had fallen, it would not be here. It would be classified elsewhere. This one obeys God. It simply does not always obey us." The distinction landed like a stone in my stomach. "What does this have to do with me?" I asked, though I already knew. "The index is reviewed periodically," he said. "Not often, centuries sometimes. We have new norms now, new procedures for alleged supernatural phenomena. The prefect has decided it is prudent to update certain classifications in light of those norms. Before one can update a classification, one must speak with the subject. There are few of us cleared to do so, and fewer still who are not wearing a collar." "You want a layman on record?" I said. "No sacramental complications. No questions about whether the interview counts as confession. And no temptation to turn the conversation into a homily," he added dryly. "You will observe. You will ask what the protocol requires. You will write what you saw and heard as precisely as you can. Nothing more, nothing less." I looked back at the file. Forbidden Angels sounded like bad fiction, but the paper in front of me was real, thick, heavy with signatures of men who had shaped doctrine and history. Some of the names in the margins had schools and churches named after them. "Where is it?" I asked. "Below," he said simply. "Under containment. You will be escorted. There are rules. You will follow them. He slid a second folder toward me. Thinner, stamped procedural. Inside, a checklist in Italian and Latin, columns of boxes to tick. Session start time, end time, environmental conditions, presence of clergy, presence of medical staff. A space for subject's self-identification, and another for observed manifestations. It looked like every interview form I had ever filled for an exorcism case, except for the header, Evaluatio Periodica, A17 INT Periodic Evaluation, Angelic Subject, Interdicted. Read it on the way, Beltrami said, standing. Do not attempt improvisation. Do not speculate out loud. Do not allow it to draw you into theological debate. You are not there to be convinced of anything. You are there to listen, record, and leave. Will there be a priest present? I asked. There will be 2 in observation, he said. They will not speak unless necessary. You are the only interlocutor. If at any point you feel unable to continue, you say so. If at any point you feel tampered with, we end the session and we reconsider your place in this section. The way he said it made clear that reconsider might mean remove. Our division did not keep people who broke under pressure. Broken people talk. We live on the edge of things that should not be told over dinner. He led me to another door at the back of the room. It opened onto a staircase, narrow and steep, lit by small lamps in niches. The walls here were older, the stones irregular, worn by hands and centuries. This was not the clean, bright Vatican that appears in postcards. This was the underside. As we descended, the temperature dropped further. My breath puffed white once, then settled. Beltrami walked with the care of someone who has made this trip too many times. I counted turns without meaning to. After the 5th landing, my sense of direction gave up. At the bottom, another door. Steel this time, with a keypad and a recessed space where a relic might sit. Today it was empty. A young priest in a black cassock stood beside it, face pale but steady. This is Father Luca, Beltrami said. He will be in the observation room. If he tells you to stop, you stop. Father Luca and I exchanged nods. His eyes darted briefly to the folder in my hand, then away, as if looking too long at the word interdictorum might carry a penalty. Inside, the containment area surprised me by its simplicity. No glowing sigils, no iron chains. Just a large rectangular room divided by a pane of thick, slightly greenish glass. On my side, a table and a chair bolted to the floor. On the far side, another table, another chair, and a figure sitting very still, hands folded. The figure looked, at first glance, like a person. That was almost a disappointment. I had braced myself for something impossible to look at, wings and eyes and all the terrifying metaphors of Scripture. Instead, I saw someone of indeterminate age and gender, wearing a plain garment the color of light on stone, hair cropped short, skin the sort of not quite pale that could belong to any place under a moderate sun. Then it lifted its head and looked at me, and every instinct I had screamed wrong in a way I did not have words for. It wasn't the face. The face was ordinary, even gentle. It was the weight of the gaze, not heavy like threat, but like gravity, a sense of being seen all at once, from every direction, pinned not in place, but in truth. I had sat across from murderers, liars, desperate frauds. With them, you learn to filter their eyes. This was the opposite. For a second, I felt 16 again, kneeling in a dark confessional, sure that the priest would name every sin I hadn't managed to say. I must have flinched. On the other side of the glass, the figure's expression shifted, almost apologetic, as if it had stepped on my foot by accident. Sit, Beltrami murmured behind me. I hadn't heard him come through the inner door. I sat. The chair was cold through my suit. My hand shook once when I opened the procedural folder, then steadied. Training kicked in. When you're scared, you cling to forms. On the other side of the glass, the angel, I might as well use the word now, tilted its head like someone listening to distant music. A speaker above my table crackled once, then clicked on. The room felt suddenly very quiet, the way hospitals feel quiet right before a code is called. Evaluation session, A17 INT, my form said at the top. Date, time, location. Interviewer, Cole, Mateo. Subject, redacted, classified, angelic. I filled in the blanks with a hand that no longer shook. I had interviewed people who claimed to see angels. I had deposed exorcists who swore they heard demons speak in ancient tongues. I had walked away from all of it with my faith dented but intact. My skepticism sharpened to a fine edge. This was different. This wasn't hearsay. This wasn't somebody's vision after too little sleep and too much incense. For the first time in my life, I was about to address something the church had officially labeled an angel and then officially decided no one should ever talk to again. The protocol told me my first word should be a formula: identification of the dicastery, purpose of the session, reminder that all is under the gaze of God. What I actually felt, sitting there under meters of stone with a forbidden creature watching me gently from the other side of the glass, was a thin, cold thread of panic and a sharper, hotter emotions underneath it. Anger. Anger that no one had told me such things existed outside of whispered jokes. Anger that there was a list Catholics would never see, tucked under marble and Latin titles, naming beings the faithful were not allowed to know about in case it disturbed the peace. Anger that I had been called down here without warning and told to keep it professional. I breathed once, twice. The anger settled into something harder. Fine. They wanted a layman who would write precisely. They were going to get every detail. I looked up at the glass. The angel, or whatever name it once had the right to hear, waited, still as a held breath. "My name is Mateo Cole," I said into the speaker, my voice sounding smaller than I liked in the big room. "I am here on behalf of the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith to conduct a periodic evaluation of your status." On my form, I marked the little box that said, "Session begun." I told myself I was still just doing my job. I told myself that whatever else happened in that room, it would end the way all my cases ended, with a file, a signature, a number on a shelf. I was wrong. They taught us on my first week in the division that some truths are handled, not solved. You open a file, you follow protocol, you close the file again. If you go home thinking you fixed anything, you didn't understand your job. I understood my job. I did not understand why they were sending me to interview an angel. Officially, we don't even use that word. The documents say, entity of presumed celestial origin. The Vatican loves phrases that sound like they were run through 3 lawyers and a theologian. You have to dig deep into the internal network before you find the older vocabulary waiting underneath. That's where I first saw it. Index Angelorum Interdictorum, the Index of Forbidden Angels. The file wasn't supposed to be accessible from a regular division terminal. It wasn't even supposed to exist. I found it because someone in administration mistyped a classification code when they forwarded my assignment and attached the wrong appendix. My name sat at the top of the directive, in crisp Latin and bureaucratic Italian. My clearance level, my role as consultor, laicus ad casus extraordinarios, lay consultant for extraordinary cases. Then, below, a schedule, a location, a reference number, and at the bottom, highlighted as if the system wanted to make sure I noticed, interview with subject, A13. Listed, Index Angelorum Interdictorum, status, interdictus sub custodia, forbidden, under custody. I stared at that line long enough for the screensaver to try to kick in twice. My reflection drifted over the text. Normal face, dark circles, cheap tie. The kind of man no one looks at twice on a Roman bus. The kind of man who shuffles papers in the background of important decisions and then goes home to a small apartment and a smaller bed. Someone, somewhere, had decided that I was the correct person to sit across from a being heaven itself had blacklisted and ask it standardized questions. My hands didn't shake when I printed the directive. They only shook when I had to sign for the hard copy. "Long night, Virgili?" the archivist asked, sliding the plastic folder across the counter. "Something like that," I said. "My full name is Matteo Virgili. My father named me after a saint. My mother joked I'd end up working in a library. I did, technically. We just file miracles and monsters instead of novels. Down in the division, people call me Virgili, the way soldiers use last names. A little distance, a little respect, never too personal. I liked it that way. It meant that when nightmares ended up in our reports, they stayed on the page. This one wanted to get out. The descent started with an elevator, like everything else in the Vatican that people pretend is still a Renaissance palace instead of a honeycomb of offices and tunnels. The public sees marble and frescoes. We see fire doors and badge readers disguised as coat of arms plaques. Took the staff lift from our floor in the Palazzo del Sant'Uffizio and watched the numbers tick down. 0, 1, 2. At 3, the panel stopped showing floors and went blank. You needed a separate keycard and a fingerprint to go lower. I pressed mine to the reader. The sensor pulsed green. The doors opened on a corridor that could have belonged to any serious bank vault or secure archive in the world. Smooth walls, low ceiling, thick air. Fluorescent lights humming with that specific pitch that settles behind your eyes. The difference was in the details. Simple wooden crosses above every door. Tiny letters carved into the lintels. Latin phrases you'd miss if you weren't looking. Old scratches near the hinges where someone, once, had traced protective signs now worn almost flat. I knew this floor. Containment A. We kept cursed objects here, supposed relics under evaluation. The occasional haunted statue that made too many pilgrims faint in the same week. I'd written reports about everything from weeping plaster virgins to a rosary that burned anyone who lied while holding it. The directive in my folder sent me deeper. At the end of the corridor, a guard waited. He wasn't wearing the colorful Swiss uniform tourists took pictures of. He wore a simple dark suit like mine and a St. Michael medallion, bright with constant polishing. "Virgili?" he asked. "Yes." He checked my badge, compared my face to the photo twice, then to the name on the folder. "You know where you're going?" "Basement," I said. "As usual." He didn't smile. "This isn't as usual, signore." He stepped aside and tapped a code into the panel. A second set of doors at the end of the corridor clicked. A red light above them turned amber. "Down one more," he said. "Follow the black line. Don't open anything you're not told to open." "Comforting," I said. The doors sighed shut behind me. The next level down didn't have a name on any map I'd seen. No label, no floor number, just the elevator opening into a short, windowless hallway painted in institutional white, a thin black stripe running along one wall at waist height. I followed the stripe as instructed. Here, the crosses above the doors were metal instead of wood. The Latin inscriptions were sharper, more recent. Someone still touched them up. The air felt heavier, not colder, not warmer, just weighted, like the space here obeyed more rules than the floors above. At the end of the hall, a reinforced glass door waited. On the other side, a small observation room. 2 chairs, a table, a fixed pane of glass set into the far wall like a window into another office. Except the office wasn't an office. I stepped through, felt the door seal behind me with the soft sigh of serious mechanisms engaging. A woman in a gray skirt suit sat at the table, tablet in front of her, rosary wrapped around her wrist like a bracelet. Dottor Virgili, she said, standing. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Your notice tends to be like that, Dottoressa, I said. Her name was Lucia. She worked for the doctrinal office that pretends it doesn't run us. Officially, she handled evaluation criteria for alleged supernatural phenomena. Unofficially, she made sure everything we wrote could, if necessary, be denied politely. She gestured to the other chair. How much have you been told? Only what's in the directive, I said. Index of Forbidden Angels, Subject A13, status under custody, 1 interview session today, 1 follow-up to be determined, no prior exposure. And what do you think that means? I looked at the window. Beyond the glass lay a room the size of a small chapel, stone walls, vaulted ceiling, no decorations, no furniture except a single chair bolted to the floor in the center, and a narrow metal rail embedded in a circle around it. Symbols were etched into the rail. Not the usual Latin prayers, but something older. The kind of script you see on very old churches, older than the Council of Trent, almost older than Rome. The chair was occupied. From this side of the glass, with the lights low in the cell, I could only make out the outline of a figure sitting very straight, hands on its knees. Short, dark hair, shoulders under a simple tunic, no color, no ornament, no wings, no halo, just a presence that made the hair on my arms rise even through 2 panes of glass and whatever else they'd buried into the walls. I think, I said slowly, that you want me to ask questions you can't afford to have a priest asking. Lucia didn't look away from the figure. You are a baptized Catholic, she said. You believe? I work here, I said. Belief is a professional hazard. That's not an answer. I believe enough to be afraid of the wrong things, I said, and not enough to blindly trust the right people. That's why you hired me. She made a small, acknowledging movement with her chin. Subject A13 was first contained in the late 19th century, she said. He has had very few conversations with our side since then. The last formal assessment was before the Second World War. Many things have changed. Protocol requires we update our understanding. Our understanding of what? I asked. Of his obedience, she said. Of his usefulness. Of his danger. She slid a single page across the table toward me. Paper, not screen. On it, 4 questions. That was all. Confirm identity and nature of the subject. Ascertain subject's disposition toward the church and humanity. Clarify reasons for interdict and whether conditions have changed. Evaluate risks and benefits of maintaining current status. That's it, I said. No 10-page catechism? No trick theology? You can add follow-ups, she said, as you see fit. But you will write the report as if these are the only questions that matter. Are they? She finally looked at me. Matteo, she said, quietly, dropping the formality, the moment you walk into that room, you will be outnumbered. I don't care that there is one of him and one of you. You will be outnumbered by centuries, by knowledge, by whatever he is seeing when he looks at you. The only thing you have is the frame. Don't let him change the questions. I'm just supposed to not listen? You are supposed to record, she said. You are a pen with ears, nothing more. She believed that, or she wanted to. I looked back through the glass. Inside the cell, the figure had not moved. No fidgeting, no sighing, no boredom written in muscles. Perfect stillness, the kind you only see in statues and corpses, or on some very old icons. I tried to feel something devotional, awe, reverence. What I felt was a shape pressing in on my mind, the way a storm front presses on your body before you see the clouds. Why me? I asked. Because you write exactly what you see, Lucia said, and because you don't talk as much as the others. less room for influence. She folded her hands over the tablet, rosary beads clicking softly. When you go in, do not offer your name unless asked. Do not ask for his. Do not agree with any statement that begins with you know or you feel. Do not promise anything. Do not kneel. If at any point you feel pulled, you will say, "Session suspended pending review," and leave. Understood? "Yes," I said. "And, Matteo?" She hesitated, then said, "Do not ask why he is on the index unless you are ready to read yourself in that file, too." That was the closest thing to a warning I was going to get. She pressed a button. The inner door to the cell hissed as locks disengaged. 5 minutes, she said. Then we cut audio if you haven't started. 15 minutes total, no extensions. Who decided that? People who still believe we can put lids back on opened boxes, she said. Go. The door was thicker than it looked. I had to lean into it to make it move. When it closed behind me, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the comfortable, muffled quiet of a church after Mass. A broadcast studio, silence, total, padded. My own breathing sounded too loud. The second thing I noticed was that my legs wanted to tremble and refused to, as if the fear had gotten stuck halfway between my spine and my knees. The third thing I noticed was him. From up close, separated only by a ring of carved metal on the floor, Subject A13 looked wrong in a very ordinary way. He was shaped like a man in his 30s. Beige tunic, bare feet, hands resting loosely on his thighs. No scars, no jewelry. Skin the color of someone who could be from almost anywhere around the Mediterranean. Dark hair cut short, not fashionably, just practical. His face was unremarkable in the way statues are unremarkable. Symmetrical, clean, almost too balanced to be interesting. What made everything inside me recoil was not what I saw. It was what I didn't. No micro movements. No shifting weight. No blink. He was not holding himself still the way a soldier does on parade. He simply was. Like a concept placed in a chair. I stopped just outside the etched circle. They hadn't told me what would happen if I stepped over it. I decided I didn't need to know. There were cameras in the corners, small black domes disguised as nothing. I knew Lucia and whoever else she answered to were watching, counting the seconds. I cleared my throat, more for me than for him. "This is session 1 with subject A13, I said, voice steady. "Matteo Vergili, lay consultant, Extraordinary Cases Division, Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. Date, time." I rattled them off, the ritual of any interview. Ritual is a shield. He lifted his head. Just that. His eyes met mine. I had read 100 descriptions of angelic gaze in the archives. Most came from mystics whose handwriting ran off the page, from peasants in medieval villages, from bored Roman nobles who thought visions made good dinner stories. Fire, light, terror, beauty, trumpets in the mind. None of them had prepared me for the feeling of being read, not looked at, read, as if every line of my life were lines on a page he could take in at a glance. He did not smile, did not frown. Something in the set of his mouth, though, shifted a fraction, like someone recognizing an old song from a single note. I realized my palms were damp around the folder. I was supposed to speak first, to control the frame. Instead, what came out of my mouth was not on Lucia's list of questions. "I work for a secret division of the Vatican that locks things like you in rooms like this," I heard myself say, each word slow, flat, honest. "And I don't know anymore if that makes me the jailer or the prisoner." His expression didn't change, but the air in the cell did. It thickened, warmed, as if someone had leaned close without moving a muscle. In that instant, I understood exactly why the church had made a list of angels it refused to name. Because if this was what obedience felt like at close range, they had been right to be afraid of what disobedience would do.